The Dark Room with your hosts, Paul Salvatori and Jordan Randall. Today we're talking with Little Bear, Bearded Woman. I guess what I want to talk to you about today is just what you do, feminism, how you see gender, and things I'm sure you've talked about on other occasions to many other people. So I guess just I'd like to start things off with just asking you about the name, your Little Bear name. Where does that come from?
So I do get asked often if Little Bear is my actual name, by which I think they're asking, is it my legal name and or is it my birth name? It isn't my birth name. It is my legal name. I changed it last year. And it was a very slow evolution. You know, I always sort of had like a kinship maybe with like bears and specifically baby bears, because I've always joked that they're like small, round, furry, playful, and cute, and so am I. So, and so there was just kind of a nickname that I gave myself. I know you're not supposed to give yourself nicknames, but I did. And it was something that stuck. And sort of every time I met new people, kind of it went from introducing myself as my birth name to slowly just calling myself Little Bear. And so that when I came to Seattle about a year and a half ago, I realized that I was dealing with a whole new network of people that didn't even know me, and I could really just start clean. And so one of the first things I did, since at that point my legal name, my birth name no longer resonated with me, I went out and changed it. In Washington, it's fairly easy to do. So It's just stuck.
Okay.
And when I started performing, I made a direct point to just be the same name on and off stage, because I know how difficult it is to have more than one name and it gets confusing. So I'm one of the few performers who's the same name on and off.
Okay, great. So I'd just like to ask next, when did you decide, because for those people who don't know, we'll have that, of course, in the show description. You have a beard. So when did you decide you wanted to grow a beard?
There was about a year and a half or so between when I wanted to grow it and when I was able. In my mid-20s, I really became kind of awake to the idea that many people don't really have a whole lot of autonomy in what they do with their bodies, specifically women. And so I stopped shaving a lot of my body hair because I kind of felt like I don't really owe this anyone anymore. And I've been able to grow this since I was about 15 or so. And so it was never something I was able to embrace, because we can accept that women can grow hair on their bodies even if we don't think they should. The ability for women to grow hair on their face is something that's relatively unknown to a lot of people. So I had a lot of shame associated with it. But when I was 30, it occurred to me that, maybe this is something I could do. But at the time I was living in small town Florida, and I had a retail job, and I was living with my parents. It was a bad time in my life. So I didn't have an outlet. I didn't have the opportunity to do it. But go a year later, and I moved to Seattle with who before that was a long-distance boyfriend, but I moved to Seattle to be with him. I began doing writing jobs from home, and I was living in a city that, at least compared to small-town Florida, was very progressive. And so it was actually something that both my boyfriend and I sat down and talked about together, and we both realized that I didn't really have the need to shave my face every single day anymore. And so I just stopped. I stopped because I realized I have an opportunity. Because, it's not always a shame thing. Sometimes it's practical. We're in a marriage, or we're in a relationship, or we're in a job that doesn't allow it. And I realized that I had this opportunity to do it. So I just took it.
Right. And along the lines of autonomy, do you feel that in having a beard that you're trying to make a social or political statement?
I guess so. Yeah. I'm doing it for myself because I want to, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that in itself is a political statement. This idea that I'm doing what I want, and my driving force is not, will they find it attractive? That's not on the front burner. And I think that in itself is a huge statement, because it's not something we're not really taught, that we can do whatever we want, even if it's not attractive to other people. But, in my year and a half since growing it out, I've been, especially since performing, it's given me this platform. Like all of a sudden I'm this public figure and my voice, travels farther now. So I began writing, and I began writing what it's like, to constantly have people tell me I should shave, or you look gross, or this is not what women are supposed to look like. And that experience that I have gave me fuel to write. And so even if it wasn't originally like a social statement, it's kind of become so, because so much of my writing talks about how, maybe one day a woman with a beard won't be, won't be a huge attraction, won't be something that I have to like I won't have to preface things with. I won't have to, we won't have to warn people. We won't have to let people know. We won't have to feel like we're an apologist for it. Maybe one day it'll just be a regular occurrence. And I'm becoming slowly aware that, the harassment I get, if I'm taking the brunt of it, so maybe women 100 or even 200 years from now won't have to. There's something powerful in that. And so, yeah, I've sort of accepted that in its own, it's become a political statement. Yeah.
So the beard that you have right now, is that the extent of the facial hair, or are you able to grow more, and you've shaped it in that sense? Or
it's, your guess is as good as mine, because I'm a year and a half in. I don't this is the longest I've ever. This is the first time I've grown it out. I haven't had trial runs or anything. So when I started a year and a half ago, everything that's happened since then, it's new to me. So I actually don't know. The growth has slowed down quite a bit. So this might be the extent of it. I'm not sure.
And what about on other are you able to grow a full mustache too? Or
no, it's probably hard to see with the camera. I've got a little, just faint. It's faint here. And it's kind of scraggly here. Most of what I have is here, I think. And the very few other women who do grow out their beards who I've discussed, I've noticed that that's sort of a pattern. We don't really have, generally, not the same as when men can grow a full beard from side to side. It either tends to collect here or be sort of patchier here and here. I don't seem to have the same pattern growth as a lot of assigned male at birth people do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think it's really cool because it's funny because I know a lot of girls that are always toying around with the idea of having facial hair, and they seem very, I don't know, just drawn to it. I've met a lot of women that are that they'll put their hair over their lip and stuff and try and make a beard out of it, and they're like, I wish I had a beard.
I see that.
And you actually do have a beard. That's so cool.
I have mixed feelings about women romanticizing having a beard, because it's flattering, because at least they're not being abusive. But I think I hear from a lot of women if I had it, I would rock it and I would show it off. And it's hard because I don't want to squash their dreams or whatever, but I always want to be quick to remind them that, it comes with a price. You know what I mean? There's a darker side to it. I have to put on emotional armor anytime, I'm in a public place, or anytime I post a picture online. I'm lucky that, because I'm a public figure, I get a lot of good reception. But the thing is, there are times I don't feel safe going out at night, or there's certain social media platforms that I don't feel comfortable going on. So I appreciate the romanticizing of it. It's a step in the right direction, but as long as women who want it understand that it's not easy.
So what is the general reaction of the public when you go out? Is it a mixed bag, or is it?
It's okay. Sometimes I'll have people take gender guesses. What is it? People ask me if I'm in between, and I'm not even. I get asked if I'm trans often, and it's funny. I actually have people ask if I'm a trans woman or a trans man. I guess my appearance plus the beard really kind of. I think people just don't know what to make of that combination. So people do take guesses, but I guess because between my height, I'm very short, and my voice, and I dress what would be considered very femme, I think most people pick up that I'm a woman. So the more common question is that real? And If it's really about gauging. Like if people seem disgusted when they're asking, I realize that there's very little I can do. Because usually when people are disgusted, they've already decided she's gross, she's doing it for attention, I wouldn't date her, her market value is low. And then this is a thing people really feel. And so when they do that, I don't engage much. But when people are genuinely curious, I don't mind. And sometimes my favorite way to answer that question is to just and I just watch people's eyes widen, and it's pretty cool. But like I said, luckily the majority of people, even if they find it bizarre, they'll be all right. That's weird, but that's kind of cool. I do get some pretty rude statements, but I'm very lucky that I guess maybe it has to do with where I live, Seattle. Seattle sees a lot. So luckily, even when people are strange, there will be a level of, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, that's pretty brave. And I can accept that.
Yeah, and it is brave for sure. I mean,
Thanks.
definitely, yeah.
It's a little
Living in a
odd.
world where, yeah, people do make some pretty wild assumptions and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, a little bit, I'm curious to know, how do you deal with the criticism psychologically, especially with what happens on the internet? As you know, people, when they're anonymous, they can be quite cruel.
I would love to be able to say that I had the lockdown on just ignoring them and F the haters and they don't matter and it says everything about them and nothing about me. And that's all true. But the fact of the matter is because I've only been doing this for a year and a half versus like the 16 years where I hit it, I'm still learning how to cope with it. I have times where it's really hard. I've gotten a few death threats, and that's not even like a hurt feelings. Like that's like I'm legitimately afraid. Luckily I haven't been physically accosted, but I've had people follow me, and that's scary. So, I mean, that's the stuff where I need to honor that it's genuinely scary. Like, I think when people are really cruel and abrasive and even violent, I think it's okay to acknowledge and honor the fact that you're in a lot of pain. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't ignore the stuff that's a huge threat. And so when I get people who are really cruel, like, I'll give myself like an hour, I mean, like, which is better because I used to need to give myself a day. But like, I'll give myself an hour to like cool off, get offline, go watch a movie I like, go cuddle with my boyfriend, go cuddle with my cat. You know what I mean? Like, I'll give myself like some self-care time.
Right.
But, other than that, I'm learning to not monitor it as much. Like, in the beginning, when I really took to social media, I made a point to very, very quickly ban, block, delete anyone who said anything cruel. And that's in my right. I have the right to do that. But I realize that when I keep it up, it appears that I care less about it. And I think that's the best thing a person can do is to not, obviously don't engage with people who are cruel. But even when you block and delete it, it still sort of puts the power on them because they know that in blocking them it's because they hurt you. And I find that when I leave up cruel comments, first of all, when I leave up cruel comments, my fans sick on them a lot quicker than I could. And I realize that in not being so quick to moderate cruel comments, it doesn't it takes the edge off of it. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to be so on top of it. If I leave it alone, their ignorance sort of speaks for itself.
Right. I mean, how do you feel that, certainly as cruel as it is, that the criticism or what's worse than that is sort of like a barometer of where we're at as a society in terms of what we expect a woman to look like? What has that taught you?
Well, I mean, I used the term market value before. And I mean, that's true. And I mean, not even like in the allegorical sense, like people use that term verbatim that, we are taught that women have, a threshold of attractiveness and therefore worthiness and have sort of an expiration date, and the right woman is one who, I mean, I'm not going to say anything that hasn't already been said, tall, thin, long hair, hairless from the eyebrows down, will be happy to marry, take your name, and give you all the babies you want. And then once she's 30, well, it's open season to go find someone else. And I mean, this is whether we implicitly don't, follow it and don't question it, or whether we enforce it explicitly. It's what we as a society uphold. We we keep women insecure, by telling them to diet, but then making them into headlines if they lose weight too fast, and then telling them to grow their hair long, but then telling them their hair looks gross if it's too long. Like we set these barometers to keep them insecure. Thin but not too thin, tall but not too tall. And that's the whole idea. People are like, what do they want from us? Like, it seems like we can do no right, and that's the point. By keeping us insecure, it takes our power away. And I think that's why I'm such a threat to people, because it's not just that I have a beard. It's that I have a beard and that I refuse to hide it. I refuse to fix it. I refuse to apologize for it. And I put out this wild notion that I deserve the same amount of respect as anyone else. And that's the thing. Like, that drives people's bonkers, because we're taught that if you're going to look different, you better either hide it, fix it, or be prepared to apologize. And I refuse to do any of it. And never has that been so apparent as it has been in the last year, when I get faced with this entitlement. Like, why would you do this? I don't find it attractive. I don't even know who you are. Like, this idea that I owe people attractive, like it's the rent that I owe as a woman, has become so apparent since growing this out. And so, in that same sense, it's become very empowering by just saying no.
Right. No, that's a great point, Little Bear, because, I find there is a lot to that, that society, for whatever reason, still seems to take offense at women who don't want to play the game, who don't want to conform to the beauty ideal. I have to say, I also really enjoyed reading your article on feminism. And what I took away from the one where I think you're trying to enlarge the scope of what feminism means. And what I took away from that also is that even among or in the presence of feminists, it's still hard to be a feminist.
It's like it's law of averages. Whenever you have any, and I was discussing this with a friend recently, anytime you have any sort of movement or community that gains numbers, by law of averages, you're going to have different opinions. And so it's really a matter of how do we want to come to the middle? Do we just want to battle it out until we declare one a winner, or do we want to try and see the perspectives of others, and try and meet halfway? Or even if not, you meet halfway. I hate agree to disagree, because it's always meant in a passive-aggressive context, but I think in a non-passive-aggressive way, understanding that, okay, maybe this is not the way I would do feminism, and maybe I can't even understand why someone is, but I respect that that's the way you do it. And I think that's it. I mean, there's something called the no true Scotsman clause, I guess, where, like, if someone doesn't have your same view, then they're not the real thing. If someone doesn't do feminism the way I do, then they're not a real feminist. And I think that is the article that you are referencing, and that's what I was discussing, that I don't think it's helpful to say you're a bad feminist if you're not a feminist if I do something different.
Certainly. So as a follow-up to that, I just want to know whether you have a definition of feminism that you've embraced.
It's about leveling out. People are very quick to say it's about equality, because I think we have this sort of compensation, because feminism has gained this this idea that it's about domination and it's about humiliation. And so people are very, very knee-jerk and saying, no, it's about equality. And it is, but more so I think it's about justice. It's about leveling out. It's about understanding that it's not just about equality. Like, for the same reason that when there was an International Women's Day, there were men who were quick to be like, what about International Men's Day? And it's the same reason we don't have White History Month, the same reason we don't have a straight pride parade. It's understanding that when you're on the bottom, when you're the low man on the totem pole, the only place to go is up. And when you're already at the top of the totem pole, it's your job to share. So it's about understanding that, because I know people are very defensive about the word privilege, and I understand why. But the thing is, privilege is not, it doesn't make you a villain. It just gives you a level up in one arena. And so it's about understanding that if we are in a place of privilege, it's our duty to share that platform. And if we are in a place of oppression, it's our right to want to climb higher.
There's other women out there that have embraced having facial hair and, growing out their beards. Do you like know them? Do you guys
It's
do you guys bond over?
it's a joke within the bearded lady community that we all know each other, and and furthermore that we're all one conglomerate person, because I think it's very telling that we always get mistaken for the other, which again a lot of us don't. Beard aside, a lot of us look like we don't look exactly alike. And I do have one who was on a show called Strange Love, and people tell me all the time, like, "Oh, you were great on Strange Love," and I'll be like, "I wasn't on it, but thanks." And they're like, "Yeah, you were. I saw you." And I'm like, "I promise you, I know this is wild, but I promise you, there is more than one of us out there." So I do always have to very politely remind people that we don't all look the same. There's more than one of us, but yes, I do happen to know a lot of them, at least virtually.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, that's something people bond over. You know what I mean? Like when, having common oppressors and common oppressions makes a good bonding point for people. So yeah, I do know of many of them.
For sure. And do you agree with like, or rather, do they agree with what your sort of ideals for feminism or reasoning for the beard is? Because I know that like people like Jennifer Miller, right?
Uh-huh.
They're a bit more, I don't know, like spectacle based, right?
Well, I mean, I kind of am too. Like I am also in a sideshow, which that's another one. People are very, very quick to go the route of that's exploitative and that's objectifying and that's degrading. And the thing is, the sideshow revival that's happened in the past 20 years has actually been very empowering. Like it's very different than sitting in a tent while people toss nickels at you. You know, Reckless Freaks, which is the group I'm in, have very much made me part of their family and made it very clear that I wasn't just going to be a spectacle, at least not in the sense that like come see the bearded lady, oh, and then some other crap. You know what I mean? Like I'm very much a part of it. I'm part of all the feats that we do. I'm an integral family member. And so my feelings might actually be very similar to Jennifer Miller's. But, as far as where this plays into my feminism, again, I think it's just a matter of the fact that I am doing what I've been shamed into believing was wrong or not given an option for. And I do it without apology. I mean, I really think that that's where this ties into feminism.
A little bit. I've heard before that the expectation that women are supposed to be hairless, quote unquote, supposed to be hairless, is a way of disempowering them because hair somehow represents power. Do you have any view on that?
I think it's important to remember to not veer too far in the opposite direction so that I shame women who do shave, because I mean, obviously not shaving for women like that, being a woman who doesn't shave, who does shave comes with a privilege because you don't get people telling you you're gross and stuff. But at the same time, I think it would be really, really easy for me to play the card of, well, I'm what a woman should like. Women, grown women are supposed to have hair on their bodies. And I think men who like, hairless women don't, they don't know what a real woman is. And I think it's like the same thing that goes on in the fat community, where it's easy to be like, oh, real women have curves, but it's not helpful because in the end, it just becomes infighting. And women are already programmed to be competitive and catty towards each other. So I think the best thing we can do is disengage that. And so I don't think as a universal, hair gives a woman power. I think women draw power from whatever makes them feel powerful. I like the way I look and feel with hair. I feel more like myself, but it is not my place for me to imply that that's where women on the whole draw their power. And I've had women who would tell me like, oh yeah, I think your beard's great. I just shaving is just not for me. Like, and they almost feel like the need to be an apologist for it. And I'm like, no, don't ever apologize if you want to shave. Just like no woman should ever apologize if she wants to lose weight. It all goes back to autonomy. We are empowered by what makes us feel empowered. And if lifting weights makes us feel powerful, if shaving makes us feel powerful, we will do it. You know what I mean? The only thing that matters is that we don't shame others for what they choose to do with their bodies.
I gotta ask though, I mean, like, the use of that word freak, right? I mean,
I know.
How do you feel about that?
I'm a big fan of the power of reclamation, that and again, it's something personal. Like, there are words that are hurtful that I can't embrace, and there are lots of hurtful words that a lot of people can't embrace. But I do feel that, like, if you feel emotionally ready and able and wanting to, I think reclaiming a word that's been used against you can be very powerful, because then it doesn't hurt you anymore. I've had plenty of people yell freak at me across the street, and it's great, because instead of like, oh no, I'm a freak, it's like, hell yeah, I'm a freak. I mean, the name of my sideshow troupe, or the sideshow troupe I'm in, is called Reckless Freaks, and we describe ourselves as such, and it's become a point of bonding. Where those of us who either have talents that are sort of left of center, or have physical makeups that are left of center, it's a point of bonding. It's something. Something, it's become communal. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I totally understand why there's shame associated with it. And I've had people say, like, what, it makes me silly that you call yourself a freak. You're not. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. It's like, yeah, I'm all of those things and a freak, and I'm very proud of it.
So I want to get, because of course you're a burlesque performer. Whether you could just say a little bit about what that is, your burlesque performance, so what that involves.
Yeah, no, it's true. Burlesque, I think, kind of paints this picture of, like carnival stripes and feather fans and the stage and bright lights. But I think a lot of people don't really know what it entails. They don't know if it's a circus thing, or if it's a vaudeville thing, or if it's a stripping thing. I joke and say that it's pretty much stripping, but with even more glitter. Mm-hmm. The fact is, burlesque. The name itself means to mock, it means to sort of gently poke fun, make sort of analogous topical humor at. But the thing is, the history of things like, kind of off-color theater, vaudeville and satire and burlesque, kind of crosses a lot of paths with different communities that were sort of seen as not ladylike, not classy. And so, burlesque shows would be played in things like brothels, and there was always a lot of crossing over between the world of any sort of work that employed female sexuality and with the world of satire. So burlesque, I mean, in and of itself has been around for a very long time. And American burlesque, would be performed in like performance halls in the 1890s, would often involve women in drag, pretending to be men, and sort of like doing a lot of singing about like pretty much sort of satire on how limited their productivity was allowed in the world because they were women. But I don't know exactly when it went in that direction, but I do know that by the 20s and 30s, burlesque often did involve striptease, and it normally wasn't complete. Like, there were normally like pasties and underwear involved, but it was, sort of like dancing and stripteasing down to music, often with long gloves and different layers of clothes and big headdresses, and it was, I mean, I guess, it was something that people could go into a performance hall and go see with an audience and live music and sort of pretend that they weren't doing something scandalous, because there was, you were an audience and there was music. This is art. And I think, unfortunately, that's why through the years there's been this schism created between burlesque, which is art, and stripping, which is work. But and to be honest, I don't see one as less honorable than the next at all. I think they're both art, but burlesque generally, the difference generally, I guess it varies state to state, but generally it's, a lot more costume, a lot more theater, a lot more performance associated with it, and that generally ends in a striptease.
Mm-hmm. So your shtick is it interconnected with your own views on femininity? Are you trying to communicate something about gender, or is it totally separate?
So the thing is, probably not, only because my avenue into burlesque wasn't really even a political statement or even really sideshow related. It was because when I first started performing here. All right, so the thing is, I sing opera, and that was something when I came here, it was something that I wanted to do in public more often. And so when I was getting booked in the beginning, I was usually getting booked at variety shows that had a large burlesque presence. Burlesque is huge. I mean, there's a huge revival happening everywhere, but especially in Seattle, it's really huge. And so a lot of these shows, I would just come out, sing a couple of arias, and I would sort of like be the in-between act, like between two other burlesque performers, just to sort of break up the theme of the night. There'd be like 6 or 7 burlesque performers, then, the bearded opera singer, and then a juggler, and then maybe a stand-up comedian and a slam poet. But in doing that, like whenever I was in the green room, or in dressing rooms with them, like I just sort of became very aware of burlesque community and all the different sizes, shapes, colors, and ages of people who are doing it. Something I talk about a lot is that we talk about how there are good bodies and bad bodies, and there are bodies that should be naked because they're good bodies, and bodies that should be hidden because they're bad bodies. And being around burlesque performers from about September 2014 to January 2015, just made me so aware of what went into it, and all the hard work that went into creating costumes and dance routines, and just seeing how much art went into the craft. It really inspired me, so that in January, for a show where I was scheduled to sing, I decided to incorporate burlesque, and it was like, everyone was totally for it. Everyone was like, "Little Bear, that you totally should do that. That'd be awesome." Especially since I don't think bearded opera singers have a large presence in burlesque. I can't imagine why. And so in January, I slowly started working striptease, and now that's sort of my thing. When people book me for a burlesque show, it's understood that usually some opera singing and some stripping will happen, and it's great because I've kind of cornered that market a little bit. Like, as far as I know, there aren't other bearded opera singing burlesque performers, but if there are, that's great. That's great. That means it started something. So, but yeah, no, it's been wonderfully empowering, proving that I don't have the wrong body to take my clothes off. There's something so immensely powering.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, I wonder, have you actually cornered that market? Because there seems to be so many niches right now. Like we were just talking to the Suicide Girls. They have their own burlesque. There's also here in Toronto, there's a cosplay
burlesque. There's a lot of crossover, and I totally understand why. I don't know if I jokingly say, I think I'm the only one doing this. There might be 15 other ones. I don't know of them. Maybe they're out there. I do know that in Seattle, what I do doesn't seem to have been replicated, or doesn't seem to have existed before me, as far as I know.
So, Little Bear, what are your live audiences actually like?
It is a lot of women, and a lot of people all over the queer spectrum. Gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary people. I mean, like that. But that seems to be the burlesque performance at odds. You noticed the talking before about the difference between burlesque and stripping. The audience does seem to be a big part of it. Like, you go into a strip club, it's a lot of men. You go into a burlesque audience, it's a lot of women and trans folk. That just seems to, I guess, because we paint burlesque as empowering. And again, I don't believe that burlesque is morally higher than stripping, but burlesque has been embraced as something that is body positive, and instead of stripping for the male gaze, we are stripping to embrace our own bodies. And I think that that's a message that resonates so well with people who are considered othered, either by their gender or their race or their religion or their sexuality. People who are marginalized understandably tend to cling towards arts where we are encouraged to embrace what we are.
Sure. And also, in terms of the energy level, I'm really curious. I have to tell you, as just a performer and myself, a musician.
Cool.
Like, what is the energy level like at your shows? Is it loud? People cheering? Like when you're doing the opera thing? What goes?
It's always a joke between other performers and I. Like when other performers, because it's mostly dance. Even if it's not like actual dance, it's moving around, like it's fluid movements, and that's something that sort of lends itself to cheering. You cheer every time a glove comes off, or when the pasties start twirling. You know what I mean? Like you cheer for every little marker in the show. With me, the tendency is for the audience to be very, very silent because I'm singing. And I think people have even said to me, they're like, I don't know how to do opera burlesque because I'm used to cheering, but I didn't want to cheer over you. So generally what happens is the audience is like deathly silent. And then once I finish, there's this huge roar, which is nice. I feel kind of braggy saying that. It's weird for me, but it's actually what happens because I think people are just they're so many new things. Like here's this girl who's stripping and bearded and singing opera in what's usually really, really elaborate costume and makeup. Like I think people are just cheering, like, wow, this is so much new stuff. I don't even know how to deal with this.
Hey, no, that's kind of why
great.
I asked, because in opera, like we're so familiar in opera context, people to be contained, right? But in your setting, I guess there might be the exception, which is so interesting. So finally, my last question, Little Bear, is I mean, do you want to see, I know we've been talking about autonomy and choice and things like that, but would you like to see a society that is overall much more accepting of bearded women or women who break the aesthetic rules of femininity?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, people ask me if I want to see 100 years from now. I'm not going to see it. But if people, like, imagine 100 years from now, like a society of bearded women. And that's the thing. It's like, no. Like, even if in 100 years, no women shaved, no women let their beards grow out, that'd be fine. What I want is for people to be able to decide. I feel like right now women shave, even if it's because they want to. I think women so many do it because they don't have an option. Like the option doesn't even exist for so many. I would like in the future for people to be like, do I want to shave or don't I? And I think that in itself is so novel. For people to be able to choose and not feel unsafe. That is something I would like to see change.
I mean, I can't help but thinking that whether it's someone such as yourself who embraces your aesthetic or the more conventional, we're always putting women in this bind,
Yes.
because it's hard, it's hard to be the one who shaves, who plucks. I mean, there's so much work that goes in. And then on the other hand, there's your aesthetic, which involves its whole other set of challenges. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, hopefully, we can get to that society that is finally accepting.
Right. Just to people to just be able to decide what they want, not what will be better received or better loved. Just decide what they want. It's so simple and yet so novel.
Right.
Okay. And you have a YouTube channel as well?
I do, yeah. If you look up Little Bear the Bearded Lady, you will see that I have a weekly vlog called Fuzzy Talk, which is where I discuss pretty much a lot of what I talk with you guys about feminism, about being a bearded lady, about doing burlesque, just kind of about my life.
Wow, that was fun. She's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Very positive, like
yes.
It's interesting. I mean, like what she has to go through, to face people that have a certain idea about women and what they should look like and beards and all this stuff. It's like it's so across the map for almost anything, like everyone's gotta be so for the public eye, and it's frustrating.
Absolutely.
It's so frustrating, but it's amazing when you see these stories of somebody who takes that into account, but then just goes against the grains, like, no, I'm not going to do this because you want me to. I'm myself and I want to do this. For Little Bear to go and make such a bold statement,
right.
That's not even really that bold. It's just bold because of the fact that we have these certain perceptions of how women should look.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic. I think it's absolutely uplifting.
No, for sure. And I was thinking about the power of the media too, because I learned about her through Huffington Post as the bearded woman. But as we were talking to her, it just became apparent to me, like, she's got multiple identities, right? She's a burlesque performer, she's a feminist writer, she's so many things. The whole identity of her being a bearded woman kind of just was something I lost sight of as we were talking to her, just because she's so multifaceted and had so much to say about all those things that we're talking about. So I do think that it's it's something I still like. When I think about her, it's a label I kind of hesitate to use, because it's just that, it's a label. And I think, looking at her other social media and based on how she talks, I think she sees herself as more of like an activist with many, or is using many vehicles to kind of get her message out there. And being bearded is just one of those many things. So
she's just an activist without even really being active.
Yeah.
Just by being herself, she's
really,
showing
by
people
example.
that you can just be who you are, and you can be successful, and you can be nice, and you can have everything that anyone else wants and has in life.
Yeah.
You don't have to really cater to other people.
Absolutely.
But I must say, though, that I'm still finding it weird to get over that term freak. I think it's just like, I mean, because, it's like any term that's generally derogatory towards like a set of people. I mean, I can't really stand behind any of that stuff, but when you're not in that set of people, like, it's kind of an interesting perspective because you're not there. You're not the one that's like bearing the full weight of the word on your own shoulders, but at the same time, you're sort of empathizing and seeing you're seeing what you think somebody would feel if they were to be called that word. So for me, I can't help but only feel upset to know that it's still called a freak show and that they're considered, freaks.
Yeah.
That to me seems weird, but interestingly enough, she's not the first person that I've talked to that has said that it's a matter of taking the word back.
Yeah, it's that whole thing. I guess it depends. Yeah, right. Who's reappropriating, if at all? And it's so politically charged. I think even the whole idea of bearded woman, I mean, is something that I think of like in similar terms because like we don't have the language really, I feel, whether you want to call it politically correct or not, to refer to women in our culture with beards. Like what is the right way of speaking of them, if there is one at all, because we don't, I mean, maybe when we're describing their appearance, right, we talk about men as having beards, or if you're giving a description of someone, to look out for that guy who's got a beard, he'll be waiting for you, at the coffee shop at 4, whatever. But it's just a descriptor, right? So, but with women, it's like, I guess that's where it comes back to the whole thing about, the way that she's being labeled in society. Maybe people can talk about that in the comments, whether like that's a fair way of regarding someone, who's a woman with a beard as the bearded woman. Is that politically incorrect? Is that, a way of pigeonholing something, or something maybe to be embraced? You're going to want to tune in next week. We're interviewing David Lynn, Toronto street preacher.
Until then,
this is The Dark Room.